Welcome to Educators Podcast. My name is Swapnil. I'm one of the intensivists at Sydney. And today we have a very special guest from Stanford University, Dr. Michael Gisondi. Welcome, Michael.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. This is great.
Today we are going to discuss about a concept which is quite close to your heart, that is networking in MedEd. And you have contributed quite a lot through Allium. So, can you please elaborate the concept of networking in MedEd and tell us a little bit more about Allium?
Sure. It's funny that you invited me to this particular topic and say it's close to my heart. I don't know that networking is close to anyone's heart. I think it comes with a little bit of a bad rap in most professional circles, but I do think there's some intrinsic value to networking, and certainly my career has advanced because of the networking that I've done in my junior faculty years in particular. To speak a little bit about Allium, Allium is academic life and emergency medicine. It's a globally distributed digital community of practice, hosted as a blog and podcast out of the United States. The editor in chief is Dr. Michelle Lin at the University of California, San Francisco. And Michelle has built a wonderful team of educators, really from around the world, who contribute to this digitally enhanced community of practice. It's a really remarkable example of networking. Our community of practice certainly shares some commonalities to the concept of networking in a few important ways. If you take networking from a very basic definition, it's the sharing of ideas between individuals who have something in common, who have a similar skin in the game in whatever it is that they're doing. That's it. It's not meant to be a shady or slimy or politically driven concept, but it certainly has negative connotations in many cultures and social contexts. Networking, I think, in a traditional manner in Western societies, occurs generally in dinner parties or conferences or work events in which you have something in common with the other people at the party, so to speak, but that commonality may be quite weak, such as we work in the same industry or our kids go to the same school. And that weak association isn't enough to engage individuals, right? It's not enough to get you enthusiastic about meeting that person and really giving of yourself and listening and being a good listener to what they need. So why keep at it, right? If that association is weak and that common bond is weak, why bother doing it? And I'll say I've been really enriched by my work with Allium since 2014 because I think our common interest is a lot stronger. Our bond is our love of medical education and innovation, technology, disruption, frankly, of the editor in chief, Dr. Lin herself. We're her team of nerds who think very similarly, even if perhaps we didn't initially know one another before we joined the team. But over time, our casual communication really transformed into group learning, which I think really is best described by the learning theory of community of practice. In our case, it's a globally distributed digital community of practice, but it is still a community.
Mike, I like the way that you mentioned about that group of like minded people coming together and taking this MedEd word forward. But what I see now, people are already getting connected through the social media, Twitter, LinkedIn. But why there is need of this kind of thing of creating a special networks in the modern education world?
Well, I think that you can be a passive consumer of medical education, knowledge, and perhaps even skills and attitudes through social media. You can be a learner who seeks out these various sources. You curate material on your own and you really contribute nothing to the conversation. And I think where social media as a networking tool within really any profession, but we'll take medical education as our example, where it becomes a tool is when you contribute as much as you take away, if not more. And I think individuals have to recognize that med ed as a discipline is far bigger than one is going to be able to master on their own. We know a lot from team science in the business field that we work better in teams, we get better results, we advance our careers better if we demonstrate good team behavior and we collaborate well with others. Really, it's all about what you learned in kindergarten and how you played well in the sandbox. And those who isolate themselves simply just don't achieve as much. So I think you can be a passive consumer of social media, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you've engaged in any kind of collaboration. It doesn't mean you've engaged in any kind of conversation. And networking is inherently a conversation. It's the sharing of ideas. That is its basic definition. So, we think about going to that dinner party and networking with our boss and networking with people who could potentially help us and advance our careers, and certainly that's part of the modern definition of networking, but truly it's just entering a conversation, explaining who you are and what your interests are, and then seeing if the person you're interacting with has enough of a shared interest in what you're doing and what you want to achieve, that together you can achieve more as a team. And over time, you may simply have a professional relationship that advances one another's careers. You may develop true friendships like we have in Allium, and have a bond that's beyond just a professional connection.
Okay, but do you think that there is a danger of overdoing things, especially when I look at the emergency medicine as a specialty, and there are so many networks are popping out now, and it's kind of hard as a consumer or as an educator decide what network to join. What's your take on that?
I don't know. I think it's a big world out there, and we really should strive to be as inclusive as we can be for folks who want to join the conversation. We need to create a big tent. I think the risk is that educators, particularly in medicine, very busy physicians who are often, generally talented bedside teachers who start to dabble in medical education as a separate discipline or domain and really don't have the same background knowledge as, perhaps they do of medicine because of medical school. They're not necessarily seeking advanced degrees or formal training in education in such a way that they become true experts in that domain. And the risk becomes these educators are really terrible at knowing what is truly innovative. I think we spend a whole lot of time repeating work that's been done by others and either unpublished or published in journals that just aren't easily accessible. And certainly the digital era and social media has made a little bit more of a level playing field amongst the medical education journals, and has expanded them. But the risk becomes of having so many networks just that folks are spinning their wheels doing work that others have done. And instead, they don't search through the big tent and build upon the work of others. And I think that's where the science of medical education has perhaps taken a backseat to other scientific advances that physicians generally point at. So I really think that's the only danger. I think if we all came into the tent, so to speak, if I keep using that metaphor, and understood that this conversation's been going on a long time, I can find my place within the tent and I can contribute meaningfully and I can have my own personal focus and narrative. But I need to take some time to understand the conversation that's been going on at the dinner party. I need some foundational knowledge to be able to then be a contributor. I think if folks enter the tent knowing that, I think they're going to be much more effective and they're going to be much more welcomed into the networks that they're trying to join.
Okay, and that might be the segue into the next question. And what do you think? What are the attributes for a successful network within the medical education?
Yeah, that's actually a really fascinating question. A network is not defined by its size or its geography anymore, and I think that really you have to just enter in with a certain set of personal commitments to making networking a positive human interaction. I think first you have to recognize that what you offer to a group is far more valuable than what you should be taking away from a group. And over time, you'll benefit from every minute spent helping someone else. It certainly creates more of a personal connection with members in a group. And again, irrespective of the size, I participate in Allium, which is, as I said, globally distributed, and it's, a very large team, many, many dozen of educators spend a whole lot of time contributing. I think there's equal numbers of folks who sporadically contribute to the website in smaller ways. But I have that team, and then I have a research team of three very good friends at three universities across the country in the United States, and we meet every week, and certainly our research team grew out of good old fashioned networking, calling one another and being impressed by one another's work and wanting to be able to collaborate, and over years doing good work with one another and making commitments to your commitments. So agreeing on the type of work that would advance our common careers, setting timelines of deliverables and meeting those timelines with high quality work that impressed everyone else in the group so that they were as motivated to contribute. It's any good team science. Last comment I would make is that I think the best networks are truly diverse networks. We know that diversity in the workplace, diversity in educational workplaces results in better outcomes for teams. Um, Diversity can be defined in a whole host of ways, but ultimately it results in diverse thought and problem solving that can be done from a variety of backgrounds and be truly innovative. You don't have as many blind spots when your team is diverse. And to be deliberate in your choice of networks that are diverse, to be deliberate in bringing in people who have different points of view than you, that have different personal backgrounds and experiences than you do, that will strengthen your team, again, irrespective of how big or small that team is.
Okay, so that's quite a nice answer. But as a budding educator, what are the things that I need to be mindful about networking before I either join any network or start creating a network?
Well, I think first you have to ask permission to join the dinner conversation, right? Networking in its traditional sense, that office holiday party where there's a number of people who have a professional relationship, but perhaps not a very close personal one, and they're forced to socialize in a way that they may not want to. Those situations actually teach us a lot about the norms of human behavior, right? And you wouldn't just walk up to a crowd of people you don't know without introducing yourself. You wouldn't walk up and ask to sit at the table and have lunch with a group of people when there's one chair left without asking permission. And I think authentic introductions that aren't overly familiar, that allow you to enter a space respectfully, I think that's the first step. Second is to just keep quiet and learn, and truly engage in the learning. It's not easy at a dinner party to get caught up on the inside joke or the running narrative that's going on, and really, you find folks who do show up late to a conversation kind of half laughing and half smiling, and they don't really know what's going on. Well, that's not what we're talking about when we talk about digital networks and networking in medical education. This is a time where you can meet someone at a conference, watch them give a lovely lecture, go home and Google them that night and find several of their papers and read them, and try to earnestly learn about their work before you then reach out and contact them. And I think that's really very important. It's tough to go up to someone with no background knowledge and expect that they're going to enter into anything more than a trite, polite conversation with you. And certainly they're not going to necessarily be agreeable to helping you with whatever it is that you need help with, unless you're well versed in their work and you're respectful and professional and authentic in what it is that you're asking them to do, but also offering to help make their life better, right? And that's the sort of basis of negotiation and collaborating, is how can I help you achieve your goals while taking something from this new relationship and helping me advance my own goals. I think those basic norms of human interaction, your amygdala talking to my amygdala in a way that makes the most sense. Those are the rules to follow as you sort of enter into new networking opportunities in medical education.
So that's quite an interesting message. Yeah, I agree with you completely that do your research first, and I like that analogy of amygdala talking to amygdala. Now, moving on and switching the gears a little bit further. Now, you guys have created this amazing network of like Allium. Now, what are the challenges in making networking not only successful but a sustainable venture?
Yeah, so there's the $1 million question, right? Or perhaps the $1 billion question, depending upon your industry now. I think sustainability is, the number one marker of success, perhaps more than dollars earned, or in MedEd world, perhaps impact of papers made. I live in Silicon Valley, where sustainability of startups is a reason that venture capital funding will come to those startups. Can they achieve their desired results in the time frame that they plan to, and then what are they going to do after that? Will they still be around in a year? Will these 20-year-old titans of industry move on to their next startup and their next venture? And I think, Allium has a long history that, probably many of the folks listening to this podcast are simply unaware of. That blog lasted long before that blog became what it was today. There were several years where the early adopters of technology, the early adopters of social media and medical education were at the table talking to one another when there weren't really a lot of other folks to talk to. And now I think we assume that social media has an important role to play in the education of young physicians and in faculty development of mid-career and advanced physicians, and recognize it as yet another tool in the educator's toolbox. So I think recognizing that you're going to have to start slow and eventually build up to an audience, an impact that you think is going to be meaningful to you and engaging to you. So recognize first that you're making a long-term commitment. And networking in medical education is no different than creating a startup, than creating a new blog or podcast. It requires a bit of personal capital that you're going to invest in these relationships that you're building within your network. You need to, again, I can't stress enough, offer more to your group than you ask of it. You're going to have to deliver some hard work to the folks that you plan to engage with over a long period of time. And recognize that it's very easy to disengage. And disengaging in any kind of relationship for a period of time causes the other party to question whether the relationship truly is there. I mean, think about friends that you haven't called in a while, right? To go out to a meal or to catch up for a cup of coffee. After a month, you're certainly still friends. After a year, really a year has gone by. Are you truly friends? Are you acquaintances? What's going on? Do you have an active relationship? Is it one that you could call up on the phone tomorrow and ask a big ask of the other person in that relationship and expect that big ask will be met with a yes and delivered upon in short order? I don't know if that's true. I think we have to invest in our relationships, both our friends and our family, and in this case, our professional relationships. If you're going to build a network, it needs to have some regularity to the interactions, even if brief, even if it's a quick email that says, I've been thinking about you. Here's a great article I read. I hope that your work's doing well. I would love to chat again after the holidays. And you set a time frame for reconnecting and for renewing your commitment and for renewing your relationship, but that relationship is there. It's in the back of your mind. There's an article to read from your friend. You might read it in a few weeks and be reminded of them and smile and reach out to connect again yourself. These are the sorts of challenges that have to be overcome. And a little bit of that is strategy, but a little bit of that is just normal human behavior. And we all know our friends who are better friends than others when it comes to email and Facebook and all the rest. Those basic norms of communication translate into positive networking experiences and positive collaborative relationships.
Now, on that note, may I ask you, within that Alien group, how do you maintain the chain of communication? Because as you mentioned again and again, I think that communication is the key. What sort of tools you guys use?
For Allium, our primary tool is Slack. It is an online messaging application on your computer desktop or on your phone that allows group messaging, but also file transfer, and it links to a number of other important applications that help organize our lives and deliver file transfer easy way. Google applications, for instance, or to-do lists and things that can be useful. It's a whole lot better than email. I mean, it certainly causes you to have one more thing to check. And if you are like me, you have 7 or 8 different teams, each using a different Slack account. It takes a bit of time to check your email and a bit of time to check all your Slack accounts and make sure that you've acknowledged all the conversations and requests that are going on there. But I find it's a very convenient way to get all of my my collaborators, my research partners, in this case my community of practice together in one particular app, and I use that with great success. We certainly take advantage of shared documents on Google. I enjoy writing all of my papers on Google Docs, and I use Google Drive quite a bit. I think a lot of behind the firewall accounts really are only useful for protected data. For instance, I think when I'm just writing and I don't need to protect sensitive data, I tend to use commercially available document sharing devices like that.
And another question that I have in my mind is, in order to grow the network, what strategies for anybody educator should think of?
I think everything comes back to high quality, timely work. And, if we were going to use the example of Allium or social media in general, if you're going to put out content, a podcast, a blog, you have to assume that your audience wants to regularly engage with you as in this case, the teacher or the person who's providing the content. And, if all of a sudden the content dries up, if they were expecting something every week and many weeks go by, they forget about you. If they expect something once a month and many months go by, they forget about you. And I think to some degree, it's the quality of the work. To some degree, it's the timeliness of the work. I think with Dr. Lynn and Allium, she did high quality work consistently for many, many years. And that became a trusted source of information for learners. I'm working with my research collaborators right now on a study in which we're trying to understand how really expert learners learn. And one of the takeaways, the early takeaways, is not all that surprising. It's trusted sources of information really matter. And, this is an interesting pause as I look at our research findings and I think about what makes a source something that you can trust. And the consistent quality, the consistent use of peer review, even in social media spaces that are not traditionally peer reviewed, I think those things garner an audience. And over time, that audience becomes a network of collaborators who want to make contributions, to the blog or the podcast or whatever the source of the communication might be.
Okay, I noticed that you have a very successful and fascinating career in medical education field, not only just emergency medicine. What's your advice to a budding educator?
Yeah, so I probably have two pieces of advice. The first is to be open minded when you're early on in your career. I have a lovely group of professional friends and colleagues who work in a palliative care space that I do some primary palliative care in the emergency department for terminally ill patients, but I certainly am not a subspecialist in palliative medicine. And I still get to participate in many of their projects and conferences because early on in my career, I entered into a couple of studies and was not an expected direction for my clinical research, but gosh, it was really fulfilling and very meaningful and certainly something that I think our first grant was funded in 2006. It's something I still 12 years later value. So I think saying yes to things that are unexpected and exploring them deeply, particularly when you're junior, is sort of the fun of academic medicine and perhaps adds color that our trainees just don't realize will come with time. The other is to narrow your focus. Our basic science and clinical colleagues, they get this, and it took me a long time to recognize that you have to have a narrative of research. You have to have something that you're extra talented in, an area where your expertise is truly noteworthy. And I look around Stanford's campus. I'm so inspired by all the Nobel winners who have focused in on tiny little channelopathies and spend their entire career working on this tiny little channel on a cell membrane and truly make wonderful advances that improve human health. That narrowing of focus sometimes doesn't happen in medical education. I think we clinician educators are pretty good teachers and we can cross a whole lot of topic areas and disciplines. And we may be great educators, but perhaps not great education researchers. And our CVs tend to be quite broad with not a lot of research depth to them. And at the end of a career, can you turn back and say, I really made a difference in this one specific area? That's sort of the challenge of contributions to science, right? And I think if you're early in your career as a clinician educator, pick something that interests you, you know, teaching people about the left ankle, not the right ankle, and stay teaching people about the left ankle, right? Just to be tongue in cheek, but the focus really matters. And how I look at some of the folks who I admire in medical education around the world, and And you can see over decades of work, they've stayed true to their original interest and have really carved a space for themselves. That's wonderful. This is reminds me of a book I like. I'll recommend a book that I read called "So Good They Can't Ignore You," and the author does a great job debunking the passion hypothesis that we should follow our passions is kind of nonsense. That really we become happier and more enriched and better in our professional productivity if we simply become an expert in something. And sometimes expertise takes time, and that path to expertise is one that isn't easily planned. But once you're there, you can truly be happy. And I am grateful to your kind words about my career path. I don't know that it was necessarily as direct a line as perhaps I'm suggesting now, but um, it's been very rewarding, and certainly I can't say that what I do every day at work today, I could say that I was honestly passionate about 15 or 20 years ago when I was a much younger man. I think uh, I sort of found myself here in a circuitous path, and I like that someone wrote a book that validates that path.
No, I think it's a really very valuable advice to all of us. Now, if the budding educator wants to contact you or want to ask more questions about networking or even perhaps join the Allium, what's your best contact details?
Yeah, I would say Twitter. I'm pretty good about answering Twitter questions, particularly those that are kind of publicly accessible. If we're going to take away some learning from our podcast conversation today, if you're going to ask a question that you want others to benefit from as well, ask the question publicly, and we'll try to answer it. So my Twitter handle is at Mike Gisondi, so it's MikeGisondi, and certainly you can shoot me a private message as well. But I think I would have more fun if we offer to our global network a little bit of advice and see what comes back in return.
Thanks, Mike. I think it's pleasure talking to you, and I think I learned quite a lot from you, and I'm pretty sure that all the budding educators will learn quite a lot from this podcast. Looking forward to reading more literature in Allium, and obviously we'll keep in touch.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Mike.